Today I'm talking about the risk level associated with 18 important dynasty running backs and talking about what moves maybe we should make. Do me a favor, go ahead and drop a like to show some love. Subscribe if you like dynasty content. And look, before you even get into the video, I just want you to pause for a second and name 3 running backs in the comments that you think are the most risky running backs long term. They carry a ton of risk if you're rostering them. Hey, if you want some solid rankings, if you want myself and Badaki to break down one of your dynasty teams, then go ahead and use our code LAND, L-A-N-D, when signing up at flockfantasy.com/land. There's a pinned comment in the description. All you gotta do is choose that motherflocker tier, and then you are good to go with a bunch of perks. Okay, so today I'm going to be tier ranking risk. And what I did is I looked at a lot of important running backs who are free agents in 2024. I looked ahead to next offseason, and I also sprinkled in, a couple running backs that in general I have some slight concerns on, and I think they might be a little bit risky. So we're going to tier rank from Todd Gurley being the most risky all the way down to low risk. And we'll just go player by player here. And I'll tell you why or why not, as far as like how risk they are. Low risk meaning very little risk. Okay, so why don't we go ahead and start with a very controversial name. This is a running back that I was completely all out on last offseason because I thought the price was just completely ridiculous. And at this point, I think this player's value has kind of plateaued to a point where I think it's pretty respectable. I think that's where he should be ranked. But let's talk about Cam Akers. Cam Akers to me is in the uh-oh tier, which is essentially like, this could be dangerous moving forward. You know, it's not for sure going to be worst case scenario, but there's a pathway here in which this player loses a ton of fantasy value. Cam Akers, currently on the last year of his rookie deal. My concern, I know he had the great end of last year. I totally hear the Cam Akers stands out there. He won people leagues. But there was also a point in that same year, which a lot of the stands like to leave out, where they were trying to trade him, where they almost cut him, right? So there's a lot of room for range of outcome with a player like Cam Akers. Not only that, but we have to keep in mind the Achilles injury. You guys let me know in the comments below. But I cannot think of a single running back who has had a serious Achilles injury, Achilles tear, on their rookie contract with the team that has drafted them, and then that team has signed them to a long-term deal for big money. I can't think of a single time that's happened. And I'm just not on board so much with trying to break what we've seen historically. Let me know, maybe I'm wrong, but anyway, Cam Akers to me is one of those running backs where, hey, if I'm on a win now team, then maybe he can be a serviceable RB2. But if I'm rebuilding or even kind of a hybrid team, I would be looking at potentially moving him in season. Let's say he starts the first 3 weeks and he's got 20 touches a game. I would be looking at potentially moving him because I'm just a little bit concerned long term for the boy. And, I hate to say that, but that's just the reality. Okay, next we'll talk about Jonathan Taylor, who is a free agent in 2024, but let's be honest, I'm not worried about it. We're 1 year removed from Jonathan Taylor being one of the best players in the entire NFL. Some injuries, a poor offensive line, a poor offense as a whole with the ghost of Matt Ryan was what impacted him in 2022. I fully believe that Jonathan Taylor is still one of the best top 5 running backs or so in the NFL. And I have no doubts that he will retain his value through 2024. Is that a franchise tag? I'm not sure, but regardless, the Colts are either going to franchise tag him or sign him long term. And if he does hit free agency, at minimum, he'll get a Miles Sanders deal plus probably more, right? So Jonathan Taylor is safe in my mind as being a workhorse running back for multiple years here. The next player I'd like to talk about, how about we talk about DeAndre Swift? Now, DeAndre Swift, I think you can make an argument that he should actually be in the uh-oh tier, okay? But I'm putting him in lukewarm. And let me just explain for 1 second. We saw Miles Sanders last year have a career year Now, DeAndre Swift's strengths don't really match with what the Eagles need from a running back. For example, the Eagles, no one threw the ball less to running backs last year than the Philadelphia Eagles, right? Well, where does DeAndre Swift get his fantasy value from? From the air. So it's not exactly like this perfect match made in heaven with Jalen Hurts. However, he's on one of the best offenses in the NFL. So this is a player that I still believe there's a lot of hype behind his name. The reason I put him at lukewarm at the moment is because I think there's a very high possibility that you can sell him for a late first round pick, either this offseason or in season in 2023. Maybe I need to reassess that at the end of the video, but that's where he currently stands for me. All right, next let's talk about AJ Dillon, who is also in the uh-oh tier. I mean, there's a pathway in which this thing gets really rough and there's almost no value. Free agent in 2024, the breakout has not happened yet, and Aaron Jones is still in town. Like, Aaron Jones is not going anywhere. He's still signed to a contract that has multiple years. When he signed that extension originally, there were rumors that people thought that Aaron Jones would be cut in a year and AJ Dillon would take over the workload. Well, that's not happened. It's still AJ Dillon leading the team. Aaron Jones leading the team, and I just don't see a pathway in which that AJ Dillon becomes a reliable starter unless there's an injury to Aaron Jones, and that's kind of hard to bet on. So with him being a free agent in 2024, never taking over a backfield, what team is going to give him big money that would indicate to us that he's going to be their workhorse? I don't know. There's not a team in my mind that stands out. Okay, so we've come to the part of the video where I have to be that guy. I have to be Debbie Downer, if you will. But the first player I'm putting in the Todd Gurley tier is Alvin Kamara. And why is this called the Todd Gurley tier? Well, to me, here's how I see it. I could realistically see a scenario in which the players in this tier disappear from the relevant fantasy player category, even though it seems extremely unlikely right now, right? No one anticipated the cliff that Todd Gurley fell off, but there's even more indicators, I would argue, that Alvin Kamara is nearing that cliff. I mean, we could get into the whole legal battle that he's currently in, but let's just leave that aside for a second. And let's look at what his team has done and what that should indicate to us. So if this team was completely comfortable with Alvin Kamara, let me ask you guys, would they have signed Jamal Williams in a free agency where no running backs are getting big money? Would they have spent a day 2 pick on Kendre Miller? I personally don't think that if this team was in love with the idea of Alvin Kamara, that they would do those things. And Alvin Kamara is currently valued, his contract is valued as the highest overall value contract for a running back in the NFL. The other guys who were in that top 10, Dalvin Cook, Zeke Elliott, what happened to both of those players? Well, they were cut because their teams just had to come to the realization we cannot win a Super Bowl if we have one of the highest paid running backs on our roster. So you have Alvin Kamara, who has the most expensive, the highest value contract in the entire NFL. You have a team who has added 2 impact running backs this offseason. A team that clearly wasn't on the same page with Alvin Kamara all last year. They misused him the entire time. He was frustrated. A team that put him on the trade block and tried to shop him around. The only reason I believe a deal didn't get done is because of the legal issues he'll likely face this year. I just don't think that Alvin Kamara is the long-term answer for the New Orleans Saints. It's almost a lock that he's suspended for 6 games. But after that suspension, with Kendre Miller and Jamal Williams there, what will his value be? Is he really just going to be the guy, even though they just drafted a rookie that they love? Will they trade him? And what scenario do they not cut him next offseason? Like, I think they have to be very realistic with themselves and say, hey, we probably can't win a Super Bowl when we have the highest contract to a running back on our roster. I just don't see it happening. So to me, there's a bunch of red flags around Alvin Kamara. And as much as we want these guys to go to different teams and recover their superstar status, it just becomes really muddy. So he's the first player I have in this red tier. Okay, the next player that we're going to talk about here is Austin Eckler. He's in that uh-oh tier for me. I'm a little bit concerned. You know, honestly, I feel like you could probably swap Eckler and Swift here. I think that might make a little bit more sense now that I think about it. But a player that you absolutely will be able to sell in season. I mean, in redraft leagues, he'll go in the first round, unquestionably. He should get a ton of receptions in PPR. He should get double-digit touchdowns this year. You want to make sure to sell this guy in season, though, because it's unlikely in my mind that he and the Chargers agree to some sort of long-term contract. He'll be a free agent after this season, and the Chargers don't seem interested in signing him to an extension. And if you move Eckler out of this system, where he is the focal point almost on the ground and in the air, that's what he was this year, to a different system, it's almost unheard of that a player in that scenario isn't going to regress in fantasy. I mean, what if he goes to the Chiefs? Do we think that they're just going to give him, 100 receptions a year? There's not a team that he goes to where I think he retains the value that he currently has with the Los Angeles Chargers. So contract year, no future, in a league that doesn't value aging running backs, that doesn't give them big time money. I mean, we currently have Zeke, Dalvin, Lenny, all these guys who are just free agents, just floating at the moment. So I am a little bit concerned, and I would suggest to sell in season at the highest point. But for this year alone, I would say he should be a fantastic fantasy option. Okay, the first player in danger ahead is Dalvin Cook. And uh-oh is like, hey, there's a scenario which this goes bad. Danger ahead is like, I think we are heading to a rough place in the next couple of years. In the next couple of years, I could easily see a scenario in which this breaks down. So Dalvin Cook had this long-term contract with the Vikings. He gets cut, and now he's on the open market, but nobody wants to pay the prices that he wants. And at this point of the offseason, I just don't see him getting the money that he currently wants, that it's reported he wants big time money. I just don't see anyone valuing him that way. I mean, analytically, he was not as efficient as he has been in his career this last season. Yards over expected per attempt, he had one of the lowest metrics in that category, meaning he's doing less with his touches than a lot of other running backs in the NFL. So no contract right now, a free agent. I mean, even if he goes to Miami, I'm just not sure he's a running back who gets some sort of multi-year deal. If you have him, you hold him. But if he goes to Miami, if he goes to Kansas City, if he goes to, the Cowboys, I don't care where it is, you need to sell this guy. Because with his age, with the lack of commitment he's ultimately going to have from a team, it's rough. You need to get off the train with Dalvin Cook. And look, I love Dalvin Cook, but he'll be 28 in season. It's not getting better from here on out. His best fantasy days, in my opinion, have already happened. And let's talk about Derrick Henry, who is also in this danger ahead category. Look, if you're a win now team, then keep Derrick Henry on your team. He's like Travis Kelce, right? If you have Travis Kelce, if you have Derrick Henry and you're competing, keep these players on your dynasty team. But if you're in any other sort of build in Dynasty, you need to sell these players. So Derrick Henry, in my mind, is one of those players where, okay, free agent in 2024, he's going to be 30 by the time the real NFL playoffs happen. I just don't see a scenario in which a team is going to build their offense around him after this contract. Now, he might be a good complementary piece, but he's not going to be, in my opinion, any sort of top 5 fantasy finish type running back after this contract with Tennessee. And to be fair, why would Tennessee give him big money? Do they really want to build around a 30-year-old running back? I mean, the history is so clear that every running back hits a peak and they no longer perform the way that they have before. And a lot of that has to do with volume and the amount of touches that a running back gets. Derrick Henry has been volume king. It will come crumbling down. Every player in NFL history has a peak. It happens. So Derrick Henry is one of those players that I would be looking to tear down from in Dynasty or capitalize unless I'm a win now team. Okay, let's talk about James Conner, who I have kind of in this uh-oh category. Now, James Conner has a long-term contract still, multiple year contract. I actually think he's a good buy, a buy for win now teams. I've bought him for a 3rd round pick in multiple win now scenarios, but he's on a team that's been very clear that they want to get younger. And I think he's going to be completely safe in 2023 because it's only Keontae Ingram and James Conner. But next offseason, it's almost certain in my mind that he will be replaced or they will draft a younger running back. They want to get younger at receiver. They want to get younger on defense. They want to get younger as a complete team, new GM, new head coach. James Conner is not with the GM who signed him. He's not with the coach that brought him in. So next offseason, do not be surprised whatsoever if James Conner finishes as a top 15 running back in fantasy this year and then gets replaced next offseason. Don't be surprised by it. I could definitely see it happening. So, again, one of those players that I'm slightly worried about. There's a pathway I could form where it gets really bad for him after 2023. All right, the next player I want to talk about is Tony Pollard. I would put him as a low risk player. He means so much to this Dallas Cowboys team that I personally struggle to see a scenario in which he's not a part of their long-term efforts. Now, he is 26 years old. He's on the franchise tag. He's willing to play on the franchise tag. But honestly, the more I talk myself into it, I think he should be lukewarm. He should probably be in the lukewarm category. Only on a franchise tag. The NFL nowadays does not like paying running backs big extended contracts. There's a possibility this team drafts a running back next year. Maybe he does deserve lukewarm. You guys let me know in the comments below. How do you feel about Tony Pollard? A player that I love in redraft leagues this year, and I think he'll be a league winner for many, many teams, but there's definitely some concern long term. Look, if Tony Pollard signed a 3-year deal this offseason, it's a different story. But the fact that he's on a franchise tag just means we're going through this same rodeo next year of what will happen with Tony Pollard. Is he still the number one? Will they bring in a different running back to compete with him? But I think he will be just fine. I'll put him in that lukewarm tier. Another player I'll put in the lukewarm tier is J.K. Dobbins. And to me, J.K. Dobbins is one of my breakout candidates. I love J.K. Dobbins, right? And as much as I want to put him in low risk, there's still a lot left for J.K. Dobbins to prove. I would say maybe he needs to be at the top of this tier, but there's still a lot left for J.K. Dobbins to prove. He hasn't been healthy for a single season outside of his rookie year. Now we're 2 years removed from that ACL. Let's hope that this is the year he puts it all together. Talent has never been the question. Never ever has talent been the question for a guy like J.K. Dobbins. But now we're coming into a contract year. This is one of those guys who'll be a free agent in 2024 with a team that, is building around the passing game from what it looks like. So I think he'll be fine. I think he's back to his old self. But there is a scenario here where things go bad. But overall, he's still a player that I would be investing in myself. Okay, let's talk about Joe Mixon. I would have Joe Mixon in the Todd Gurley category. Look, Joe Mixon, oddly enough, was a buy low for us on this channel throughout the offseason. We were seeing deals where people were getting him for the 206 all the way to the 210, as crazy as that sounds. However, we need to be realistic with Joe Mixon. Look at what just happened to Dalvin Cook. These veteran running backs who were superstars in fantasy, who had these long-term contracts, nobody is safe. And that includes a guy like Joe Mixon, who is on a team that has a quarterback who needs to be signed long-term, a wide receiver in T. Higgins, who will earn big money long-term. And then eventually they have to talk about what to do with Jamar Chase, which they will sign long-term. If this team has to choose between signing the big three of Burrow, Higgins, and Chase, or keeping Joe Mixon, they will easily make the decision to cut Joe Mixon. It will happen. And that's not to say that Joe Mixon will be completely irrelevant somewhere else, but it just makes his situation very, very muddy. And we are seeing running backs just getting used and abused. So Mixon is one of those players I think we need to be very, very, very careful of. If you bought him low, like we said, for the 206, 208, whatever it was in season, unless you're competing, it's probably time to flip him when he's a top 12 running back, let's say halfway through the season. Go ahead and flip him for like a mid first or whatever you can end up getting for him. Okay, Josh Jacobs, I would also have as one of these low risk players. Josh Jacobs was incredible last year. He was your NFL rushing leader. I think that he and the Raiders will figure out a deal. He just means so much to that franchise, just like Jonathan Taylor. I don't think we need to talk too much about that. The next player I want to talk about is Rashad Penny, who I would put in the danger ahead category. Now, Rashad Penny is also one of those running backs that I have been suggesting to buy low. But guys, that's because he was like the running back 50 and he cost like a mid third round pick, this offseason. What I'm saying is he's in that category of running back where if he does retain his form, if he does become the starter for this team, don't be afraid to sell him for an early second because he's already 27 years old. It's not going to get any better from here. He signed a vet minimum contract. Yeah, it's a prove it year, but what you want to do with these buy low, sell highs is buy him low when he was ranked RB 50 and sell him high when he ends up being like RB 35 to RB 28 or so, right? You want to capitalize on that volume. You spend a mid third round pick, but you sell him for a mid second, for example, right? If everything goes right, I definitely think we should be out on Penny in dynasty formats. Saquon Barkley is a free agent after this year if he signs his franchise tag. I would also put him in that low risk category. Saquon Barkley is the New York Giants. The New York Giants are Saquon Barkley. I think they'll get a deal done, long term. Regardless, he is a talent of running back that I believe if he chooses a new team, if that's what ends up happening, he will be still a workhorse. There are a lot of running backs on this list that I don't think are in the talent level of Saquon. And if they have to switch teams, their role as a workhorse will ultimately be questioned. All right, the last couple of players that we're going to talk about here, one being Damian Harris. And this is the same thing as Rashad Penny. Same exact spiel, honestly. A player that we said you could buy low, right? And in season, if he ends up being the goal line guy for them, 8-9 rushing touchdowns on the year potentially, you want to sell him. Even if you're competing. Like Penny and Harris, those are two running backs. Even if I'm competing, I want to get a second round pick for them come 2024 in the 2024 draft. All right, last two running backs that we're going to talk about. The first one is Aaron Jones. And look, Aaron Jones is going to be absolutely fine for redraft purposes. But when you look at the peak age for running back, it's typically around that 28 and a half mark for running backs who have multiple seasons of being top 12. Typically the peak age is right around that 28 mark. We're already past that with Aaron Jones. So unless you are a win now team, this is a player that hopefully you can sell for an early second round pick, unlikely getting a first. But unless you're a win now team, this is not a player that you want on your roster long term. Yes, Aaron Jones is fantastic. I've bought him for a third round pick this offseason. But again, if someone offers me a high value second next year, I'm absolutely considering that offer. It's just tough to bet against history with a guy like Aaron Jones, especially at his size. He's not like a Derrick Henry who's huge and can bowl you over. No, he's had, his fair share of knick-knack injuries with his size. And the last running back I'm going to talk to you guys about today is Jet McKinnon. A running back who will be a free agent in 2024. And it's very similar to what we've been talking about this entire time. But hey, if you are not a win now team, this is a player that you might have on your roster. A lot of people would have done 0 RB strats in their dynasty startups this year. Jet McKinnon may have been one of your last picks. Well, if he picks up his form, and this is the only reason I'm even talking about Jet McKinnon, if he picks up his form that he had last year to end the fantasy season, then you want to trigger any sort of third round pick compensation for a guy like Jarrett McKinnon. There is no future for him. I promise you, he will be irrelevant this time next year. It's almost a certainty at this point. At his age, at his size, he will be irrelevant once he leaves the Chiefs, which is likely to happen in 2024. So A lot of talking, you know, in this video, you know, consistent. I haven't taken a breath here, but I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you heard out the reasoning that I had for all these players. Let me know what you think about in the comments below. I imagine there will be a lot of different opinions, and that's completely fine. But do me a favor, drop a like to show some love. Subscribe if you like Dynasty content, and we'll see you in the next video. All up. Now that those idiots are done talking, who needs some rankings?
Hell yeah, I need some rankings.
Then use promo code LAND, L-A-N-D, for 30% off any membership at flockfantasy.com.
Oh.
It's so easy, even your grandma could scan that QR code right there.